Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Britain to end automatic benefits for asylum seekers under new plans to try to slash irregular migration. UN Security Council to vote on Monday on a resolution endorsing US President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. Massive Great People's March marks first big UN climate protest in years. India at COP30 urges developed nations to fulfill climate finance promises. And South Africa skittle India for 93 runs, registered their first test win in India after 15 years, take 1-0 series lead. Britain will drastically reduce protections for refugees and end automatic benefits for asylum seekers, the Labour government announced late Saturday under new plans aimed at slashing irregular immigration and countering the hard right. The measures, modelled on Denmark's strict asylum system, were announced as Prime Minister Keir Starmer comes under pressure from surging popularity for the anti-immigrant Reform UK party. Britain is set to launch the largest overhaul of policy on asylum seekers in modern times, drawing inspiration from Denmark's approach, one of the toughest in Europe and widely criticised by rights groups. The Labour government has been hardening its immigration policies, particularly on illegal small boat crossings from France, as it seeks to stem the surging popularity of the populist Reform UK party, which has driven the immigration agenda and forced Labour to adopt a tougher line. This country has a proud tradition of welcoming those fleeing danger, but our generosity is drawing illegal migrants across the channel. The pace and scale of migration is placing immense pressure on communities. I will end UK's golden ticket for asylum seekers. As part of the changes, the statutory duty to provide support to certain asylum seekers, including housing and weekly allowances, will be revoked. Taxpayer-funded support will be prioritised for those contributing to the UK economy. Length of the refugee status would be cut to 30 months. Presently, those given refugee status have it for 5 years, after which they can apply for indefinite leave to remain in the UK and eventually apply for citizenship. Measures will apply on those asylum seekers who can work but choose not to, and to those who break the law. The Interior Ministry added that these measures will be regularly reviewed and refugees will be forced to return to their home countries once they are deemed safe. Shabana Mahmood is expected to provide further details on Monday about the measures, which the Home Office says are designed to make Britain less attractive to illegal migrants and make it easier to remove them. More than 100 British charities wrote to Mahmood, urging her to end the scapegoating of migrants and performative policies that only cause harm, saying such steps are fueling racism and violence. Polls suggest immigration has overtaken the UK economy as voters' top concern. Asylum claims in Britain are at a record high, with some 111,000 applications made in the year to June 2025, according to official figures. And some 109,343 people claimed asylum in the UK in the year ending March 2025, a 17% rise on the previous year and 6% above the 2002 peak. Tanvi Taneja for DD India. A delegation from the Caribbean Community Reparations Commission will hold talks this week with officials and politicians in Britain on addressing the historical injustices of slavery and colonialism, as well as their lasting impacts. According to official statement, the CARICOM Commission's visit will take place from November 17th to 20th to the United Kingdom. The visit aims to strengthen strategic partnerships and promote a joint program of public education and engagement on reparations agenda. Calls for reparations have gained momentum worldwide, particularly among CARICOM, a group of 15 member states that includes Barbados, Jamaica and the African Union. CARICOM has a reparations plan which includes calls for a full and formal apology, education programs, debt cancellation and monetary compensation, while the African Union is developing its own. The UN Security Council will vote on Monday on a resolution endorsing US President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. Last week, the Americans officially launched negotiations within the 15-member Security Council on a text that would follow up on a ceasefire in the two-year conflict between Israel and Hamas and endorse Trump's plan. A draft of the resolution welcomes the establishment of the Board of Peace, a transitional governing body for Gaza that Trump would theoretically chair with a mandate running until the end of 2027. It would authorize member states to form a temporary international stabilization force that would work with Israel and Egypt and newly trained Palestinian police to help secure border areas and demilitarize the Gaza Strip. The United States and several Arab and Muslim-majority nations, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, call the UN Security Council to quickly adopt the resolution. Ahead of the UNSC vote, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu discussed the situation in West Asia, including developments in Gaza, Iran's nuclear program and stabilization in Syria over a phone call. Russia circulated a competing draft resolution to the Council members that does not authorize the creation of a board of peace or the immediate deployment of an international force in Gaza. The Russian version welcomes the initiative that led to the ceasefire. It also calls on the UN Secretary General to only submit a report that addresses the possibilities of deploying an international stabilization force in war-ravaged Gaza. The Russian UN mission said in a statement that its alternative proposal differed by recognizing the principle of a two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian settlement. Amid all this, Israeli protesters gathered in Tel Aviv on Saturday to demand the Israeli government to appoint a committee to initiate a state inquiry on the events of October 7, 2023 attack. Demonstrators also demanded the return of remains of slain hostages from Gaza. Under the October ceasefire deal, Hamas agreed to the release of the last living hostages seized during the Hamas-led October 7, 2023 attacks on Israel. On to South America now. Mexico witnessed widespread protest against the government of President Claudia Sheinbaum at Zocalo Square. Youth-led protests were rallied under the umbrella title of Gen Z, referring to those aged under 28. Youth protesters threw rocks at the police in front of the government palace during a Gen Z march against President Sheinbaum. Thousands of people marched through the streets of Mexico to protest against drug violence and security policies of President Sheinbaum's government. Sheinbaum faces criticism due to several high-profile murders, mainly in the state of Michoacán. Moving northwards, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the White House to protest against US President Donald Trump. The protest, which remained peaceful, culminated with a march and a demonstration as activists wrapped crime scene tape around the perimeter of the White House property. This is the first of the three protests. The second will be held on November 17th and the third on November 24th. The US military released a video it said showed a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel described as being involved in illicit narcotics smuggling in the Caribbean. On its X account, the US Southern Command said that the strike had occurred on November 10th at the direction of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. In the black and white video, the boat appears to be traveling at high speed when it bursts into flames and stops. The US strikes against suspected drug vessels in the Caribbean and off the Pacific coasts of Latin America have killed dozens of people who President Donald Trump's administration calls drug trafficking terrorists, responsible for thousands of deaths in America without providing evidence. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky renewed his plea for more air defense systems a day after Russian strikes on Kiev killed 7 people. His latest comments came after Russian missiles struck apartment blocks across the Ukrainian capital on Friday. Russia-Ukraine conflict has dragged for nearly 4 years, with diplomatic efforts to end it failing and fears growing for the country's energy security ahead of a 4th winter of conflict. Ukraine said Russian attacks had killed 4 people in its southern region on Saturday, while it had attacked a Russian oil refinery near Moscow. Ukraine has regularly staged missile and drone attacks inside Russia. Ryazan Governor Pavel Malkov said Russian air defenses had shot down 25 Ukrainian drones over the region during the night. Hungary gears up for 2026 parliamentary election, with opposition leader Peter Magyar drawing large crowds in Győr on Saturday as he stepped up his campaign to challenge Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Magyar's centre-right Prasar Party leads Fidesz in most polls, boosted by public frustration over a stagnating, inflation-ridden economy. Accusing Orban of driving Hungary into recession, Magyar said voters want change. Earlier, Orban held his own rally, warning of rising war threats in Europe and promoting tax cuts, wage hikes and housing aid as his government tries to revive weak economic growth. A team from 60 Parachute Field Hospital paid solemn homage at the War Memorial in South Korea, laying a wreath on behalf of the DGAFMS and the Indian Armed Forces. The contingent honored the gallant Indian troops who rendered distinguished service during the Korean War, reaffirming the steadfast military ties, shared legacy of sacrifice and continued camaraderie between India and the Republic of Korea. India and Bahrain have reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening bilateral ties during a high-level phone conversation. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar spoke with Bahrain's Foreign Minister Dr. Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani, where the two leaders discussed ways to further deepen the long-standing and multifaceted partnership between New Delhi and Manama. Both sides exchanged views on key regional and global developments, underscoring their close coordination on issues of mutual interest. The conversation highlighted the continued warmth in India-Bahrain relations, spanning sectors of trade, energy, security and people-to-people ties. In Lisbon, Indian Ambassador Puneet Roy Kundal received Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa at Diplomatic Bazaar 2025, marking 50 years of India-Portugal diplomatic ties. The exhibition highlighted India's rich cultural heritage, and both sides reviewed the full spectrum of bilateral ties, including trade, defense, renewable energy, agriculture, science, and tourism and education. They discussed ongoing bilateral agreements and agreed to expedite their conclusion. India and Portugal also reaffirmed cooperation in multilateral forums like that of the United Nations and exchanged views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. And now we take a look at other stories making news across the world. Pope Leo met with Hollywood actors and filmmakers on Saturday at the Vatican during an event for the Church's Holy Year. He spoke about the challenges facing cinema amid global uncertainty and digital overload, addressing stars like Kate Blanchett, Adam Scott and Spike Lee to highlight the industry's struggle to survive. Displaced Sudanese families have arrived at a United Nations refugee camp in Tawila after fleeing the war-torn Darfur city of Al-Fashir, where famine and fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces have devastated communities. They registered with UNHCR, highlighting what the UN calls one of the region's largest humanitarian crises. French farmers claim to have cooked the world's largest tartiflette, weighing more than 2 tons. The record attempt was made by a group of volunteers and members of the Young Farmers Union of Savoy, Albertville in France. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Indian Air Force participates in the 8th edition of the bilateral air exercise Garud 25 in France. And Sikkim government announces opening of Doklam and Chola for tourists by December 15th this year.
When we stop seeing ourselves as separate from the world around us, caring for our planet becomes caring for our own existence. So today, let's meet people who are showing us even small steps can bring about lasting change.
I left the teaching job, started protecting palm trees. I began creating awareness among children in schools and colleges why palm trees are important and why we should care about saving them.
This habitat develops on its own inside the vortex pool. There's water moss on the walls and here on the bottom. The moss growth on the walls and bottom is proof that the water quality really is improving.
Past, we didn't know what conservation was or how to preserve or protect the wildlife. Now, through this restoration site, we are trying our best to carry forward a legacy of protecting the environment.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reviewed the under construction bullet train station and the high-speed rail corridor in Surat, Gujarat. Prime Minister carried out a detailed review of the progress of the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail project. This ambitious project is considered the foundation of India's modern transportation revolution. The Surat station will serve as a key hub on the entire corridor. Multimodal connectivity is being created there by integrating metro, bus, and local transit systems. During the visit, Prime Minister Modi also interacted with the workforce. On to Brazil now. Tens of thousands of people thronged the streets of the Amazonian city hosting COP30 talks on Saturday, dancing to thumping speakers in the first large-scale protest at a UN climate summit in years. As the first week of climate negotiations limped to a close with nations deadlocked, indigenous people and activists sang, chanted and rolled a giant beach ball of earth through Belém under a searing sun. Others held a mock funeral procession for fossil fuels, dressed in black and pretending to be grieving widows as they carried 3 coffins marked with the words coal, oil and gas. It was the first major protest outside the annual climate talks since COP26 4 years ago in Glasgow, as the last 3 gatherings were held in locations with little tolerance for demonstrations: Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Azerbaijan. Called the Great People's March by organizers, the Belém rally comes at the halfway point of difficult negotiations and follows 2 indigenous-led protests that disrupted proceedings earlier in the week. India criticized developed countries for failing to meet their climate finance obligations. Speaking on behalf of the like-minded developing countries at the 3rd high-level ministerial dialogue on climate finance at COP30 in Brazil's Belém, India said climate finance is a critical enabler of climate action in developing countries. India's negotiator Suman Chandra emphasized the critical need for predictable, transparent financial assistance from developed countries to enable developing nations meet their nationally determined contributions, NDCs. India made it clear that the climate transition in the global south is being held back by broken promises. India's remarks highlighted the legal obligations set out by the Paris Agreement that developed nations have yet to fulfill. India specifically pointed out inadequacies in the new collective quantified goal revealed at COP29 and called for substantial, consistent financial support from wealthier countries. At this year's climate conference, developing countries have demanded that Article 9.1 be included on the official agenda for formal negotiations. NDCs are national climate plans under the Paris Agreement that set targets to cut emissions and adapt to climate change, guiding global efforts to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Weather updates now. Southern California is on high alert as back-to-back storms hit Los Angeles, bringing heavy rain and raising serious fears of flooding and mudslides in wildfire-scarred areas. Forecasters warn that rain sweeping down from the San Francisco region could trigger floods, especially in places damaged by January's wildfires. Nearly 180,000 people have been evacuated as authorities prepare for possible flooding and mudslides. The storms may ease by Sunday, but more rain is expected later in the week. Storm Claudia is causing dangerous weather across Europe, from severe flooding in southern Wales to deadly storms and a tornado in Portugal. Several areas remain on high alert as authorities warn of serious risks to life and property. In southern Wales, Storm Claudia's heavy rains caused severe flooding early on Saturday. Water burst into shops and submerged cars on Lower High Street after the river Mono overflowed. Authorities issued several flood warnings for Monmouth, calling the situation a significant risk to life and community. In Portugal, the storm turned deadly as one person was killed and around 24 injured on Saturday. A tornado hit a camping site in Albufeira, destroying caravans, while more people were hurt at a nearby hotel. With the death toll rising to 3, the Algarve and nearby districts remain on amber alert. Back to Asia, Myanmar was hit by a mild earthquake early Sunday, with tremors recorded by India's National Centre for Seismology. According to the NCS, a 3.5 magnitude earthquake struck Myanmar at a shallow depth of 10 kilometers, increasing the chances of aftershocks in the region. On to India's northeast now. In a major step towards expanding frontier tourism, the Sikkim government has announced that the strategically sensitive sites of Doklam and Chola will be open to tourists by December 15th this year. The decision marks the first time civilians will be allowed access to these high-security border zones. The sites were originally scheduled for inauguration on 27th of September, but the plan was delayed due to administrative and logistical hurdles. Sikkim's additional Chief Secretary for Tourism, C.S. Rao, confirmed that preparations are now in their final phase. By opening these previously restricted regions, the Sikkim government aims to promote adventure and heritage tourism. The Sikkim government is preparing to open Chola and Doklam under the Battlefield Tourism Initiative of the Defence Ministry. This place is located at nearly 14,000 feet and nearly 70 kilometers away from Gangtok city, the capital. On the other hand, Chola is a must-visit for history buffs, adventure enthusiasts and nature lovers for its captivating landscapes and rich heritage. The Sikkim government and the army are developing these places to welcome tourists by next month. But the government will only allow a limited number of vehicles and bikes daily, with specific do's and don'ts instructions while visiting both places. At least 4 Bangladeshi nationals died after migrant boats capsized off Libya's coast, the Libyan Red Crescent confirmed on Saturday. The incident happened on Thursday night near Al-Khams, east of Tripoli. One boat carried 26 Bangladeshi migrants, of whom 4 died. Another boat had 69 people, including 2 Egyptians, dozens of Sudanese migrants and 8 children. The fate of passengers on the second vessel remains unspecified. The Election Commission of Nepal extended the deadline for voter registration by 5 days, granting citizens time until November 21st to enroll for the upcoming House of Representatives election on March the 5th. The Election Commission has made arrangements to provide biometric details as photo and fingerprints using national identity cards from November 13th to manage the pressure of voter registration. The Commission is carrying voter registration and updating work targeting the upcoming election of the members of House of Representatives. Earlier, the voter registration deadline was set for November the 16th. And the deadline given by the Election Commission of Nepal for registering new political parties ends on Sunday. old political parties already registered with the Commission had to re-register for the upcoming elections. So far, 178 political parties have been registered in the Commission. The Indian Air Force will participate in the 8th edition of the bilateral air exercise Garud 25 in France from Sunday. Indian Air Force will conduct the exercise with the French Air and Space Force till the 27th of November. The Ministry of Defence said that this exercise aims to refine tactics and procedures in a realistic operational environment. The ministry added that it also provides an opportunity for professional interaction, exchange operational knowledge and sharing of best practices between the air forces. During the exercise, Indian Air Force's Su-30 Mark 1 aircraft will operate alongside the French multi-role fighters in complex simulated air combat scenarios, focusing on air-to-air combat, air defence and joint strike operations. And on to some sports news now. Off-spinner Simon Harmer led South Africa to a thrilling 30-run victory over India inside 3 days of the low-scoring opening test in Kolkata. Harmer claimed 4 wickets for 21 runs as India, chasing 124 for victory, folded for 93 runs in a remarkable batting meltdown at the Eden Gardens. Chasing a small total to win, India were already short of a batter as skipper Shubman Gill, who was retired hurt in the first innings, could not bat in the second. To make things worse, Marco Jansen claimed 2 wickets in his first 7 deliveries to leave India reeling. Yashasvi Jaiswal fell for a 4-ball duck while opening partner KL Rahul made 1 before he too perished. Earlier, Temba Bavuma dragged South Africa back into the contest with an innings of tremendous grit. His unbeaten 55 runs was the only 50 by any batter on a minefield of a pitch, where inconsistent bounce and spin made life difficult for the shot makers. The second and final test of the 2-match series is scheduled in Guwahati from November 22nd. And that's all for this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And you can also download our DD India mobile app for quick news and updates on the go. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.